Hello and welcome to another episode of the Veterans Corner. My name's Chuck Wood and I'll be your host, joined by my co-host, Megan Dooley.
Hi there.
Yeah, it's great to have you back, Megan. You know, it's been a while since we've had the show going on with COVID and snowstorms and everything else. It's great to be back. We've got a group with us today. Actually, Brian, you've been here before.
Yeah, November of 22.
Yeah, we had a great show. That's why we wanted to have you back. We're actually going to be doing a double header this time because there's a lot of information to be put out. We got actually Reverend Brian Evledge. He's the founder and president of Forging Foundations Incorporated. He's also the owner of Evledge Metal Works LLC.
Yeah, it's merging into one activity, even though it's two corporations.
Navy veteran?
Yeah, 82 to 86. Navy corpsman.
Actually, Navy stacked up here today.
Yeah.
To my left, we got Bob Hunter. Bob, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's your first time here. You're gonna have a great time. Navy veteran.
I am. 80 to 84.
You know, why don't you tell us 80 to 84?
Yep.
Where was your home base?
Well, I finished my tour in Norfolk. I was on the Eisenhower.
Okay.
I'm a Beirut vet. So.
When were you there?
Well, I was in the Med 1983 and 1984.
Okay. I was in Beirut myself from 82. Well, actually, the fall of 82.
Oh, okay.
I was discharged in 83.
We just missed each other.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Passing in the Med.
Yeah, I had just gotten on board in early 83.
Right.
Yeah, I joined the Navy to see the world. I grew up in New Jersey and got stationed in Connecticut, so didn't see much of the world. I did 2 years and 10 months of my 4 years out of Groton at the sub-base hospital. I was an operating room surgical technician as a Navy corpsman.
Well, on behalf of the Veterans Corner, the viewers, want to thank you both very much for your service.
Thank you.
And for yours, thank you.
Yeah. Navy veterans, right? Like I said, the stage is stacked tonight.
Hoo-yah.
You know, we've got a lot of information to put out. This, you know, what we heard the first time you were here, really it interests us and the viewers. So let's jump into this. You know, you were here before. Can you give us a little bit of the previous episode and, you know, just a quick rundown of who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I've worked an awful lot with individuals that have sustained trauma. A lot of veterans. I've expanded the scope of the program to first responders and healthcare providers. COVID has created a lot of trauma for people, but primarily out of my for-profit Forge, I run nonprofit programming for people with stress, PTSD specifically, and have had a lot of veterans come through, and we do a forging program where we take a mangled railroad spike. The more deformed, the better, because at the end of the process, the individuals leave with a completely brand new, usable, functional knife made out of that mangled spike. And it's a figurative object lesson to show that no matter how sort of damaged the front end process is, through heat, repetition, and sometimes pressure, eventually transformation into something new, usable, and shiny can occur. And it's a great object lesson for individuals that really don't see that hope to realize, wait a minute, there is something that can be built out of the sort of wounds of the past.
Exactly. I mean, when you told us earlier that was made out of an old railroad spike, it's amazing.
Yeah, and they're plentiful. So it's nice, it's a low-cost opportunity to be able to do something tangible. People can do more, they can come back for follow-ups, but the initial class of doing this, and I've had many guys and gals come back to me that they've got it proudly positioned in a place of honor in their home or their office, depending on what they do. It's a nice sort of hallmark event for them to show, wow, something old and seemingly, you know, beyond hope.
Yeah.
Can actually be transformed into something new. And so it makes a wonderful object lesson. And I've gotten some great feedback from people on just what it meant. And I didn't realize that at the front end. I was just doing it because I thought it was a good thing to do. Yeah. But it's grown into a whole curriculum. I even have youth-specific PTSD programs now. I'll be doing work with the Boys and Girls Club end of this month, as a matter of fact. There are some young people who've come across seriously tragic circumstances, and so they're dealing in a whole different way with trauma, and we're trying to find a way for them to have an outlet as well.
How long does it actually take to transform?
We schedule 3 hours, about 2 hours, 15 minutes normally. I've come to observe that a lot of veterans, when they get close to the end of a project, they kind of sabotage. The not finishing is an easier outcome than finishing it, but not the way you wanted. So I sort of give a false expectation of 3 hours so that at 2.5, when they're finished, they haven't come to that point of sabotaging the outcome. And then they get to see the finished product. So about 2.5 to 3 hours.
To go from that railroad spike to the final product.
And that's for someone who's never done it. For someone like I can do one of those in about 4 minutes with my power hammer. By hand, I can do it in about 20. So
Nice.
for
He's
someone
quick.
with no experience in that, they can walk away with a successful project in under 2.5 hours.
Or 5 or 6.
5 or 6, yeah. So we'll add like a golf handicap.
One thing the viewers don't know that we've known each other for, oh God.
Since the 90s, probably, yeah.
We worked together, you know, in the state, and it's great to have you here.
Well, with knife making, there's probably some people sitting on their couches and thinking, oh, I can do that. So what's something that's very surprising about the knife making project or product that some people who come into your building might not expect?
It's not a flat piece of metal. Most people think it's just a flat piece of metal. There's a lot of engineering to a blade. Geometry is important, the heat treat. It really is a very complex thing to accomplish correctly. And when people realize all the moving parts, they actually gain a whole new sort of respect for the craft itself. Blacksmithing doesn't involve hardening steel, bladesmithing does. So there's a whole different tier of math and science needed for making a knife that you don't have to have just for hitting metal. So it really is, it's the PhD level of moving metal in a sense.
Wow. And Bob, you have been a part of this program. So tell me, like, what sparked your interest in forging blades?
Well, I was going through a period of isolation. I had just bought a house, actually, and I was getting used to living by myself. So I was isolating pretty hard and depressed, and I started binge watching Forged in Fire. And I never got to see Brian's episode, but I saw Eric's episode, and I'm sorry, Eric's name just went right out the window.
Eric Fontaine,
Eric Fontaine.
my first apprentice.
Yes, and
Wow.
well, Eric won.
Eric won.
Yeah, so he was at the time, I think, from Granby. And
Bristol.
oh, from Bristol. Okay. Well, I had reached out to him and said, hey, you know, do you have anything that a veteran might be able to pick up and learn how to, you know, beat on some metal for a while? And he put me in touch with Brian. Brian contacted me, and I showed up.
And the rest was history.
Or hysterical, depending on how you want to look at it.
And so, but before we continue the story, I'm sure there's people who are looking at this beautiful dog that is resting so peacefully by your feet. Can we do a little introduction? Because I think we forgot to do a little introduction to
did.
Mr.
We did.
Bandit.
Well, Bandit is 9 years old. He's a border collie, and he's been my service dog for the last 7 years. The relationship's changed quite a bit. Initially, when I first had him, he was working all the time for me. And we've become a little more, we lean on each other a little more now, which is actually really good for me. Normally dogs will, they'll do what they're told, or they'll follow a set of rules internally if you're dealing with something like, in my case, PTSD. And what it's shifted to is actually more like working with a horse now. Well, when you work with a horse, if you want to be able to work with a horse, you're going to be able to take your energy down to get near the horse. And he'll express agitation, and it's my job to take my energy down to calm things down. And it's just changed the dynamic a little bit.
So in a way, he's kind of like a mood monitor.
Absolutely. He absolutely is. It's a good call.
It's a beautiful dog.
He's okay.
We can
You know,
dedicate
in-
a whole episode to him because, I mean, He's just baby.
Yeah.
You know, right?
You know, the viewers are used to us being at the desk, but we always use this setting, this set, you know, when we do have a service dog. It'd be nice if we had them more often. It's always nice to have a dog on the set.
We'll ask Mr. Nutmeg TV if we could get an official mascot, a four-legged
There we
mascot.
go.
How about that?
That'd be great. Yeah, Bob, the program has helped, you know, how has the program helped you coping with the PTSD? And, I mean, has it lessened the symptoms?
I'm at the stage now where PTSD is kind of hits me out of the blue.
Yeah.
Whereas initially I was dealing with full-on anxiety all the time. It seemed like it was, you know, all my waking hours. When I started working with Brian, it was my desire to do this was a fewfold. I got interested in knife making by watching Forged in Fire, and I said, you know, this is something that doesn't seem like, I mean, for me, would require a great deal of overhead. I know that owning a forge would, but learning wouldn't be so bad. And I discovered through it that I'm able to be present, and you have to be present. You're working with a hot piece of metal. So if you're not safety conscious and focused on getting the task accomplished, you could get hurt. And so it you know, the desire to craft something, shape something, and do it while being safe requires focus. And so for me, it's a healthy distraction.
I mean, we've been in an occupation where PTSD it's common.
Right.
You know, we're all veterans here. We've all seen it. We've all experienced it. You know, you had said it. Maybe a lot of people don't understand that you go through that from that point where it's anxiety all the time, and then all of a sudden it could be just out of the blue. It nails you. It's like a panic attack.
Right. And I don't know what's more insidious, the actual onset of symptoms or that time later on where it gets you. You can be having a great day and you're not.
Driving down the road and all of a sudden, bam, it nails you.
The lightning strikes.
Yeah.
And it's not like you see it coming.
But you never see it coming.
No.
I've gotten to the point where I've been able to identify most of my triggers. And there's still things, even knowing what the triggers are, when you experience them, you can't stop the onset. Yeah. So for me, it's really loud people. Like if I'm in a restaurant or something, there's one loud person. No, the ambient noise isn't so bad. It's that one person that's above and beyond will set me off, and he goes to work.
You know, you could be at that point where you think you've got that trigger controlled.
Yeah.
And then a couple months later,
oops,
it's there.
It's true.
Yeah, and you both and Brian talked about how it is a practice of control because, as you said, one mistake, one careless move, and you could accidentally lead to something like a small injury, a burn, or as me, if you give me a hammer and a nail, 9 out of 10 times, I'm going to hit my thumb, no matter how careful I am. So I know this project would be, it's teaches not only control, but helps you feel like a bit of control in your life because at the end you have that physical manifestation of all that hard work and effort. Bob, before I talk to Brian about who else he's helped with this program, what's the one piece that you made part of your Forged in Fire collection that has stuck with you, that is maybe your favorite piece or something that is the most meaningful?
Well, I think the first piece I made, it was just like an everyday utility knife. That was my first piece. So, although I made a railroad spike knife that I use for splitting kindling at my dad's place for the stove, the wood stove, I use that all the time now. So it's, I think the utility knife probably is the nearest and dearest, and I still have that because it was my first project.
That's incredible.
Sentimental.
Yeah. And Brian, now that you're hearing from Bob about how your program has helped him, what other veterans have really stuck with you, and how are they impacted by this activity?
I've had perhaps 400 people in the last 3 years come through.
That's incredible.
And nobody ever pays. So it's easy to track people that are coming through when there's no transaction behind it. It's a relationship that's being built. And I had one veteran in particular, female, who had lost a limb. And she just sent me the most heartfelt email expressing what she learned during the day, and that she didn't need all the parts. You know, we whittle away steel and we grind away excess to bring out the part that's truly necessary. And it gave her a realization that she didn't need all of her original parts to still be functional, to still have value and purpose. And I'm working with a 23-year-old that's terminally ill. Success stories are different for every person that I interact with. And so there's really not a quantitative way to say that's what success is. But when somebody just has a revelation of something they didn't realize before they walked in the door, and they walk away with a different level of understanding, to me, that's huge. To know that just space and availability of time is a mechanism. We had a day where Bob called, I was available, we had lunch, and then Bob came back to the forge and we turned a horseshoe into a heart. And the thing that struck me about that was not the heart he made. It was weeks later, I was away on vacation, and Bob came out to the forge one night with the rest of the guys. I don't have to be there all the time. And he made another heart out of a horseshoe because he wasn't satisfied with the first one. And he sent me a picture of it. Yeah. And so it showed me that it was something significant enough in that first interaction that Bob really wanted to refine it. And so just getting to see individuals that gravitate towards something and walk away with a new understanding, a new passion for something, to me, forging is exactly that. Passion creates heat, heat creates transformation. And so if they're passionate about the project, and the side effect is artistic creativity uses different neural pathways. So if you're logic driven, the other side of your brain is getting a workout, doing something creative. And sometimes that rerouting helps you navigate around some of those trauma centers in your brain. So there's a physical outcome, there's a emotional outcome, and there's a figurative outcome. And it's nice to see when they all come together. And everybody's story, I don't have consent to share all of them, but that woman's email to me was at a time where I was like, is this worth doing? And it really made me realize, no, whether it's one person a month or 5 a day, it's worth doing.
And something that stuck out to me is you said, no one pays. Is this a free program?
The PTSD specific coursework I have is completely cost-free for the individual who is participating in that. We underwrite it through several different options. Some people, about 50% of my for-profit business goes straight into my nonprofit. So I'm kind of self-funding. Chuck and I walked away from the same career years ago, and our pensions enable us pretty good quality of life. So I'm able to dedicate everything that comes out of the shop to growing the shop and to growing the nonprofit. And so that's how most of it is funded. If somebody has to worry about, how can I repay you, they're not being blessed. And so I want individuals to know, and Bob's offered me guitar lessons because that's the way guys are. We feel like we have to compensate for receiving something. And so I wouldn't turn that away because that gives him fulfillment. But the reality is, I don't want somebody to ever feel like they owe something because they've received something. It's not a gift then, and I have the pleasure of the availability of time to give it as a gift.
And it sounds like what you get in return, instead of money, you get a different type of fulfillment that's even more valuable than currency.
Yeah, yes. And it fulfills the dual sides of me. I'm also an ordained minister. Chuck called me Reverend early on, and I really feel like I'm fulfilling what God's called me to do, which is to be what someone needs at the time they need it. And so I kind of get to satisfy the spiritual side of my personality as well as the human side of it, where I really want to be beneficial to somebody else.
You know, it's amazing. You know, the first time you were here, we learned an awful lot. This time, you know, with you coming back, I mean, there's just so much more that we're learning and how beneficial, you know, this program is. You know, Bri, there's got a good friend there. Hey, buddy.
He wants your job.
Yeah.
Chuck Wolfen.
Face to the camera, though.
Yeah.
Wolfen, there you go.
You know, the veterans come through. Is it a one-time deal, or do they have opportunities to participate again?
For the most part, it's a one-time deal. I do have follow-up opportunities for folks. Most don't take advantage of it. Sometimes it's a drive. I have people driving from other states that come in. There's a lot of Smiths around the country doing something similar, but for whatever reason, I've been blessed that a reputation has been established, and so word of mouth brings folks in. But if they want to do something more, then we have a Monday evening fellowship where on any given Monday I'll have 4 people or I'll have 12 or 15. And the Monday Bob went back and redid his horseshoe. Some of the other guys coordinate the evening. Eric, who won the episode, acts as my right-hand man, a guy named John, very experienced. The intriguing part is it's not about forging. We had one Monday last year where we wired my new shop building and then had pizza. And so it's getting together and living life. And one of the gentlemen who comes out regularly found his sibling deceased. Oh. So not everybody who has PTSD is a veteran. And coming together and having a safe environment where people can talk about whatever's pressuring them for the day without knowing that a mandatory reporting situation is going to violate the trust that can be built. And I know there's an importance to reporting, but there's also reporting on things that may not necessarily be of that significance, and it shuts people down. They're not free to share if they know everything they say could come back to bite them. And so I just try really hard to keep it an environment that's safe, that's conversational. And sometimes I don't even pay attention to Bob. I mean that in a good way. I'll watch Bandit more than I'll watch Bob.
You know that?
I feel like an unrestrained child now.
Well, yeah, Bandit is a early warning system for me. If Bandit activates, then I know Bob is in a situation. And it's like anything else. Once you teach a child to ride a bike without training wheels, you don't go out and hover. So I'm there if there's an issue, but I want people to experience the failures and then figure out there's a way to fix them, because that in itself is an object lesson in life. We don't succeed in everything we do.
You know, this show, as all of our episodes, they go by so fast. We've got 2 minutes left.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, we've got 2 minutes. One more question, and then we'll have to wrap it up. But not to worry. This is a two-part series, and we will be back to continue. But let's throw one more in.
Yeah, we can combine the final two. Is how long have you known Brian, Bob?
It's been a little over a year. Right around a year.
When you did Let It Be, I think it was about 10 months then. So, and that was last June?
No, that was April, May.
April, May. So probably about 1 year and 3/4, I would say at this point.
Yeah.
Time flies.
And my
Tempus
question. It does. Nice Latin.
Yeah.
And my question for you is, what is something that you know has changed in your life because you two have connected?
I've added a person to a very small stable of people I can trust. Part of my issue is I have trauma issues that involve trust. So with Brian, I know that if I need, in fact, the day I went to make that first heart, I had a day. I had a bad day, and he called me over to the shop, and it was a place for me to let out some frustration physically.
You know, I hate to do it, but we've got about 15 seconds left.
All right.
But once again, we're going to continue this. It's been a great conversation. I want to thank you guys for being there. Part 2 is going to be another great episode. So with that being said, we're not saying goodbye. Thanks for tonight. We're going to be back again next week. For the viewers of the Veterans Corner, thank you very much for watching. Good night, and see you next time.
Good night.
The Saybrook Fish House in Canton has been serving fresh seafood, chicken, and steak entrees for 34 years, offering 3 cozy dining room settings, a newly renovated pub with craft beer, wine by the glass, specialty cocktails, and a lighter fare menu. Open for lunch and dinner 7 days a week. Reservations accepted for parties of 2 to 42, and gift certificates are also available. The Saybrook Fish House, nestled at the crossroads of Route 44, 202, and 179 in Canton.